Okay, so today we're going to start our journey through the life of the Apostle Paul. And episode one here, I'm going to call it Saul of Tarsus. Saul was born in the city of Tarsus. It was a Greek Roman city up in modern day Turkey. And I guess I want to start a little bit by talking really about Tarsus, the city itself, and and share some things with you. First of all, the city has been in existence since 4000 BC. So Tarsus has been around a long time. In 860 BC, Shalmaneser of Assyria listed target among its conquests. The city was captured and sacked by Sennacherib of Assyria in 696. In 333 BC, we have Alexander the Great, who bathed in the icy waters of the Cydnus River. He actually caught a cold that almost killed him, and so that kind of made the Cydnus River there in Tarsus famous. After the death of Alexander the Great, the Egyptians conquered Tarsus, so it changed hands from the Greeks to the Egyptians. The Hellenistic city, the Greek city of Tarsus, was founded in 171 BC. In 67 BC, Pompey of Rome, Pompey the Great, occupied Tarsus during his campaign against pirates in the Mediterranean. In 66 BC, the government of Cilicia, including its capital Tarsus, passed into the control of Rome as they defeated the Greek army, and the Roman Empire rose into prominence there. So Tarsus is an interesting place. It was not a municipality or a colony like some place like Philippi, Macedonia, or even Antioch in Pisidia. And we'll talk about both those places, Philippi and Antioch and Pisidia, later on. But Tarsus was a free city. Such a city had privilege of being governed by its own magistrates. It was exempt from Roman taxation. It was exempt from occupation of a Roman garrison. You see, even in Jerusalem during the days of Jesus' ministry, that the Romans had a garrison in Jerusalem there. But Tarsus was a free city, so they did not have an occupying garrison there. And although not all the citizens possessed Roman citizenship, Paul's father was a Roman citizen. We know that because Paul was born a citizen, and the only way to be born into citizenship is for your father to have been a citizen before you. So we don't really know how Paul's father became a citizen. His grandfather may have became a citizen. He may have been born into it. We just don't know. He could have purchased it. You could purchase citizenship. It was probably very expensive. He may have actually been awarded citizenship as some sort of gift for doing something special as a Pharisee and leader of the synagogue, the Jewish synagogue there, is possible that he had performed some unique service for a Roman soldier of some sort and was granted citizenship as a gift. There's just no way really to know how Paul's father received his citizenship, but Paul was born a citizen, so it did descend to him. He was born a citizen, and citizen itself had a certain privileges. He could never be crucified. He can never be whipped without a trial. I mean, there were just certain things that the Roman government would not do to their citizens that they could do to pretty much anybody else. In addition, Tarsus was a cultural trade center, and we'll look on a map here in a minute, but the Tarsus Mountains kind of separated all of the South Asian area there, the Greek regions of what's modern day Turkey. They could come cut through the mountains and cross over into Assyria and into Israel. And so it was a major trade route that they protected. The first century was very famous for philosophizing, and of course, Athens was the Mecca, the center of philosophical education back in the first century. But Tarsus was right up there among them. Tarsus was famous for philosophers of what they called the Stoic school. and philosophers like Strabo. In fact, Strabo names 5 Stoics who were born in Tarsus: Antipater, Archidemus, Nestor, Athenodorus Coeur de Lion, and Athenodorus, the son of Sandon. And so there are several there. Athenodorus Coeur de Lion was the head of the university while Paul was a child, so he would have been there. Athenodorus Coeur de Lion had also been a friend and advisor to the Emperor Augustus. So, I mean, this is kind of showing you how the influence that Paul had when he was a child. Although he was brought up in a strict Jewish home, he had a wealth of Greek literature and philosophy before him. In fact, Paul, in his sermon at Mars Hill, he quoted Greek poet Aratus of Soli, who was from Paul's own province in Cilicia, when he said in Acts 17:28, "We are also his offspring." So that was a quote from that philosopher. In Titus 1:12, he quotes from Epidemius, Epimenides. Okay, I'm gonna stop trying. He was a Cretan poet, and he said Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons. And of course, we know Paul quoted that in Paul's statement, 1 Corinthians 15:33, when he said the evil company corrupts the good habits, was a well-known Greek proverb from a line of poetry in Menander's comedy Thais. So he had a lot of that. Paul. Another thing about Tarsus, there was a brand of sheep, I guess, the up in the mountains of Tarsus that were raised up there, and they had a very special kind of goat's hair, sheep hair, that they used in making tents, and it was kind of like a Gore-Tex type material, if you want to compare it to something of today. And so he learned, his father was a tent maker. They would use that goat's hair to make tents. And of course, his father taught him that trade. So he would have been in the marketplace as doing the selling and buying and trading of that. And of course, we know Paul's talents as a tent maker and tent repairman helped him throughout his ministry. So we'll come back to some of that too. I want to talk about this map because right here's Tarsus. This is modern day Turkey if you're looking for it on a modern day map, and Tarsus is right here. These are the Tarsus mountains, this range right here, and there was just a little passage through here that came down over into Assyria and Israel that linked this region with this region over here. And so Tarsus set right here. And I guess one thing you should know, back in the Old Testament, there was a time before Old Testament was where Israel was destroyed, and the Assyrian army destroyed the northern kingdom, and a lot of those people would flee out into this region here, up into the Macedonia and Greece and Achaia, and then the Babylonians destroyed the southern kingdom, and a lot of people fled down into Egypt, and of course they were taken in captive into Babylon. And so you had this big dispersion, they call it. It's a dispersion of people throughout all of this land where Hebrews were dispersed. And so after Romans took control of the area, they rebuilt the temple. And Herod was fascinated by the Roman temple, or the Hebrew temple in Jerusalem, and put a lot of his own money into making that thing bigger and bigger and bigger. Of course, they were allowed to reinstitute their sacrificial system. The Romans were bloody and vicious anyway, so they loved all that stuff. But because the temple was in operation and the sacrificial system had gone back into operation, a lot of the Hebrews that had been dispersed started moving back towards Israel. And so that's what you have. And I only mention that, well, I mention it for two reasons. One, Paul being in Tarsus, his family may have moved there to serve in a synagogue there that was built during that dispersion. And you'll find out as Paul goes on his missionary journey that a lot of the places he went to, there are already synagogues there, and that's why. Another reason I mention it is because once we get to the life of Christ and we start seeing the building up of the church, you're going to see that it was a time when a lot of these people were moving back into Israel. And so a lot of stuff was going on, as people moved back in. So you kind of had both ways, going both ways. You had all these people that left and started synagogues and stuff. So all this stuff was already established. But then it was a time when people started coming back. And so Jerusalem was growing. And as the church grew, they moved out into Damascus and to Antioch. And so that's kind of a picture of that. And so I just wanted to kind of go over a few more things here. There's little bits and pieces about Paul kind of throughout the New Testament. He talks about being circumcised on the 8th day. So the Ishmaelites were circumcised in the 13th year. And of course, Gentiles that converted would be circumcised at the time of conversion. He said he was of the stock of Israel, the seed of Abraham. He was a member of the covenant nation, a tribe from the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews. He spoke the Hebrew language. He was born a Pharisee as the son of a Pharisee. And so the references to the Pharisees go back to the days of Ezra and Nehemiah when they spoke about people that had been separated themselves from heathen living. And Nehemiah spoke of the seed of Israel separating themselves. And so the Second Temple period is the period after the Babylonian captivity. The Persians defeated Babylon, and so the Persians allowed them to go back and rebuild the city of Jerusalem and the temple. And that's what you see through the Old Testament writings of Esther and Ezra and Nehemiah. That's the period when this was taking place, the rebuilding. And Sadducees in the Second Temple period were wealthy political and religious leaders, and this group of Pharisees kind of sprung up that had separated themselves from political corruption, basically. And so then there started this power play between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and they had different duties within the temple and outside the temple. The Pharisees basically enforced the law and oversaw local punishments. One of the things I can tell you that they created a court called the Sanhedrin Council, and half the members were Sadducees, half the members were Pharisees, but the high priest always sat at the head of that council. And so they would have 70 members, 35 of each, and then they would have the high priest that sat over them as the 71st member of the Sanhedrin Council. So there was always one more Sadducee than Pharisees on that council. But so that's a little bit about them. Paul was born a Roman citizen, and out of 80 million population of Rome at this time of their history, only about 6 million were citizens. Of course, to be a Roman citizen, he would have been required to know Latin. So Paul spoke Latin fluently. Paul was famous here for the goat's hair tents that he made, and because he lived in a Greek culture, because Tarsus was a Greek community, and he spent so much time in the public square, the public market, he would have had to have known how to speak Greek to interact in that society. He was also educated. His elementary education for a Pharisee would have been stressed on memorizing the Talmud. Of course, once you get to a certain age, you would have to memorize the 6 orders of the mitzvah, I guess is, or no, 6 orders of the Shosh is what they say. And so this is what they are. But to be a Pharisee, he'd have been required to know Hebrew and Aramaic. So that's kind of where he is in his childhood education, learning, and growing up there in Tarsus. And so I'm going to put a link to a video, Footsteps of Paul, as he is born in Tarsus, and it's an excellent video. It's about half an hour long, but I hope you'll go and check that out in addition to today's material. And tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about his moving into Jerusalem. All right, so I hope this was a blessing to you. We'll talk to you later. God bless you.